Welcome to our professional development session today for the FACE program at Common Sense. I'm Jasmine Hood Miller, Director of Family Engagement and Community Partnerships. We're so happy to have you join us here today. We have a great hour lined up for you, and we're going to use every minute of it. So I'm going to jump right in and get started. As you know, we recently surveyed our FACE members to better understand how useful the resources we've been providing have been for your family engagement needs and which skills and learnings you are most interested in strengthening. Two of the top responses we received were around communicating with families and creating engaging events. We heard you, and today we're going to cover both of those and so much more. And so it is my pleasure to welcome um, Dr. Rita Perez. Oops, there you go. And Rita's there. Dr. Rita Perez is our guest speaker today. Rita is a project director with the Mid-Atlantic Equity Consortium's Collaborative Action for Family Engagement, aka CAFE, and the Senior Educational Equity Specialist with Center for Education Equity, CEE. In her role as the project director for CAFE, she provides staff management, budget oversight, and liaises with the Maryland State Department of Education and Pennsylvania Department of Education. Her work with CEE includes providing technical assistance and training for state departments of education, districts, and schools to improve educational opportunities for all learners. Rita has almost 3 decades of experience in public education as a teacher, elementary and secondary school principal, and district office cabinet member. Her lifelong commitment to educational equity focuses on the areas of systemic school improvement, professional development, teacher and principal effectiveness, instructional and school climate practices, and teacher leadership. She has served diverse learners, families, and communities throughout her career and has worked in large and medium-sized school districts in urban and suburban areas. Rita had the honor and privilege of serving in cabinet level positions at the Pennsylvania Department of Education, including as Deputy Secretary of the Office of Elementary and Secondary Education and Director of the Bureau of Curriculum Assessment and Instruction. She holds an EDD from Immaculata University in Education Administration, a master's from Lehigh University in Educational Leadership, and a BA in Psychology from Cedar Crest College. And when she's not doing all of this amazing work, Rita balances her life by cooking, gardening, traveling, and spending time with her husband watching movies. And maybe we'll get a favorite pick or two or a new must watch at the end. And so today we will go through a few things. I'm going to turn it over to Rita in just a moment so she can give us the blueprint for effective family engagement. And then I will come back in later to share some of Common Sense's tips and EdTech tools for connecting with families. And we'll have time for questions at the end. However, please feel free to add questions throughout the session in the chat. And I'll be monitoring the chat, and Rita can also pause for some questions during the presentation. Okay, Rita, you can take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Jasmine. I'm so excited to be here to talk about family engagement. And I really like what you said in terms of a blueprint, because some of the work that we do, actually all of the work that we do at CAFE, is really not about putting programs into place, but providing structure, framework, and guidance, as well as technical assistance and coaching to help you develop what is an effective program for your school community and your context. Jasmine described who we are, but our equity approaches are to increase outreach to diverse communities, to ensure voices from each community are shared, acknowledging their expertise. We want to make sure that we are identifying and removing cultural barriers. And then finally, we want to review and redefine traditional family school community engagement to capture and understand parental engagement in communities of color. I'm sure many of you have seen many graphics around the term equity, and we like to share this slide so that we are all kind of level set and thinking about equity on the same page. As you'll see in this top left corner, their tree is leaning off to the left and produces an inequality in terms of how one person can access the fruit falling from the tree versus the other. When we look at the equality tree, we added two of the same size ladders. While the person on the right can now access the tree, they still can't access the fruit, and the person on the left actually is getting more fruit than they had before. When we look at equity, we give the person what they need to access the fruit, which is a taller ladder. And so now they're able to access the fruit, but still not as much as the person on the left side. So, what we're really aiming for in our work is justice, where we're fixing those systems that have leaned from one side to another for whatever reason, so that all parties can get access to the same amount of fruit and enjoy those resources. We have two major goals that are within our federally funded grant. And one is to increase high impact culturally responsive family engagement by addressing systemic barriers. And the second one is to build capacity of educators and parents to practice high impact practices. So let's start with MAEC's definition of family engagement. It is a collaborative partnership between schools, families, and communities that embraces and relies on strengths, cultures, and experiences to create a supportive environment where every student can thrive. So the elements of that definition are: we want to affirm, number one, the role of families as partners and really hone in on the fact that it's incumbent on schools to offer these opportunities in communication so families can be welcomed in and support their child. Families in turn can be more effectively advocate and collaborate with school communities to increase inclusive learning environments by contributing their unique strengths and cultures. This approach builds school community that values and includes every family's input. We want to make sure we're enriching learning and well-being. So when we talk about are these events linked to learning, it's also about social emotional learning as well, not just numeracy and advocacy. So we want to do this to ensure that families are equipped to support their child's academic and emotional success. And finally, we want to strengthen community partnerships. Family engagement collaboration happens when all members of the school community, including organizations that support families, work together to continuously seek understanding, give respect, and share responsibility and support for student well-being and development. This collaboration creates a strong network for families and student success. Speaking firsthand with this element of it, as a former principal of a community school, I can tell you the impact that having those deep partnerships with families made on our students and on our staff morale. It was really it was a very powerful opportunity for our community. So our core beliefs within family engagement are that all parents have dreams for their children and want the best for them. All parents have the capacity to support their child's learning. Parents and school staff should be equal partners, and the responsibility for building partnerships between school and home rests primarily with school staff, especially school leaders. So if we have any school leaders on the call today, this is really important for you to understand. Teachers will follow your lead, and if you support effective culturally responsive family engagement, they will come with you. So this is some research. I'm not going to read the slides to you, but what I really want to point out in the research is that it really shows a 10 to 20% positive impact in student achievement when family engagement is attended to. Many times we talk about family engagement as a nice to have opportunity. However, we say that it is a must have opportunity and it must be included in your school improvement and continuous improvement plans and linked in and integrated into the work that you're doing. Culturally responsive family engagement is an approach to meaningfully engage with families and communities to increase student achievement. In the past, we've talked a lot about family involvement, but we've not really engaged families in the conversation. Engaging families implies a two-way conversation. Culturally responsive family engagement involves practices that respect and acknowledge the cultural uniqueness, life experiences, and viewpoints of families. As our communities become more and more diverse, it's important to understand the perspectives of those communities and understand that educational systems in the world are different. And it's important for us to help parents come into our system and make connections from our educational system to their system so they better understand and can support their students. We want to draw on the experiences to enrich the curriculum, teaching and learning, and extracurricular activities. So again, engaging with families and respecting and acknowledging cultural uniqueness helps us inform how we design our curriculum, how we allocate resources, how we create a welcoming school environment for all of our students. Does the school around you reflect the students around you? And finally, is it respectful collaboration and partnership with families and community? And when we say respectful, we really mean that we're doing it in and with an intent. We're engaging in an intent where we're going to take family input and we're going to put it to action. Many of you are probably already familiar with the dual capacity framework. This is the framework that we use in our work. We're today going to focus mostly on the process conditions, but we'll talk briefly about organizational conditions as well. Many of you, if you're educators, you've heard of John Hattie, and Hattie has done many studies around the influences of various factors on student achievement. He's also done family factors as influences on student achievement. And you can see here the high correlation between family factors and student achievement for a few things. The bars in green identify things that we as school personnel can be responsible for and be in control of. We can't control socioeconomic status or positive family and home environments, but we certainly can, improve a teacher-student relationship, parent involvement, home visiting programs, and even engaged versus disengaged fathers. Those are things within our control and we can plan for. And then the Flamboyant Foundation has this really nice graphic that describes the low to high impact opportunities for parents. And what we want to see in family engagement plans is a really nice mix of low and high impact, because we want to be able to allow our parents to enter into family engagement where they're comfortable. It's much like in the classroom, you meet the students where they are. We want to meet the families where they are and provide them with opportunities that range, like I said, from high to low impact, low to high impact, depending on their level of availability for involvement. So the organizational conditions in the dual capacity framework really embrace three things: systemic and embraced by leadership across the organization. This is, to me, as a former, principal and district office personnel, if the district leadership is not on board, it's very difficult for principals to get support and funding for family engagement work. So it really starts with leadership. It should be integrated, embedded in all the strategies, and it should be sustained with resources and infrastructure. Again, that is that systemic and embraced by leadership piece. Let's turn to the process conditions. We're going to talk about all four of these. So let's get started. So within the process conditions, the first and probably the most important piece is to build trust. We need to have trust in order to have authentic relationships, be it with our families, with our friends, with our spouse, with our relatives, and the people around us. The same goes with families. So how do we do that? We want to do it in an era of benevolence. We want to make sure that the confidence that one's well-being or something one cares about will be protected and not harmed by the trusted person. We want to be reliable. We want to exude the confidence that you can depend on the other person to come through for you, to act consistently, and to follow through. We want to make sure that we are embracing competence, the belief in another's ability to perform the tasks required by this person, honesty, and openness. When we say, what does it mean to build trust? This is somewhat of a two-way street. But again, like I said earlier, it's incumbent on the school to initiate the family engagement, and it starts with building trust and making sure we're attending to these items. So building relational trust, respect. We want to respect each other's personal and professional expertise, and we want to center family voice, seeking input and listening. And with competence, we want to establish common goals and value for each other's feedback, sharing of successes and challenges, integrity, plain and simple, keeping your word with families, personal regard, trust and willingness to learn from one another, time for fun, enjoy the process. Many of us on this call are parents as well. And even though we are school personnel, sometimes it's difficult for us to approach our child's teacher. And if we can go in with these pieces in mind, we can have a much better relationship with our child's teacher. When we're talking about that, respecting personal and professional expertise, that's that two-way street, right? Making sure that we understand who our parents are and respecting where they're coming from. When we talk about being linked to learning and development, we want to know, are families taking home new ideas that they can use to support their child's academic and development needs in the classroom and at home? Does the experience provide a concrete way for a family to support their child's learning at home? Does the experience provide a way for families to share their understanding of their child's learning with educators and as school staff, acknowledging families as capable of learning and as part of the teaching team for their child? So I present to you this element called link to learning and development, and say to you, these questions are great guiding questions when you're talking about planning a family engagement event that might be linked directly to academics or social emotional learning. To take a look at these questions and see how you can answer them. And also remember, when you're planning these events, invite a parent or so to be on that committee so that their voice can also be heard, and you're truly getting a view from the parent of what they need around that topic. We want to adopt a strength-based approach, right? So that's the other reason we really want to bring families into our planning for family engagement events, because we want to have these events with them. We don't want to do it to them, correct? So that's the engagement part. We know that all families have strengths. We need to find out what they are. We know that families are the first and most important teachers of their children. They are partners with a critical role in their child's development, and families have expertise about their child and their family. And we have to really work to figure out how we're going to find those things out. One of the approaches that we use is either an empathy interview, or we do a back to school survey or questionnaire with parents to ask them, what are the hopes and dreams for your child? What are their strengths? What are you concerned about? What do I need to know about the best way your child learns so that I can develop my lessons, my programming to best meet their needs? And let's get into the idea of cultural responsiveness. It's a way of being. It takes consideration of differences in culture. It is a mediating lens through which we make sense of the world and our lived experiences. And as educators, we want to take those three elements and say, we want to intentionally take into account the socio-political issues that affect students and families at each developmental stage of their life. And we want to commit to initiate transformative changes in practice and decision-making with the explicit intent of improving the educational experiences and lives of families and teachers. So in this way of being culturally responsive, one of those things is looking at, current events, and saying, oh, does any of the current events happening today or yesterday or maybe even coming up, how does that impact my school, my community, my students, and what can we do as a school to support them in that area, and how can we help make some connections and support them through. The other piece that I submit to you to ask regarding developing your family engagement events is to take a look at these essential questions. Um, I've had some folks actually print this slide out and keep it on their desk and pin it up, because it's a good reminder for them as they're planning. Um, is the event going to be culturally responsive and equitable? Does it leverage the expertise, knowledge, and leadership of families, community partners, and the learning community? So you also want to bring teachers into this as well. Is it intentional, relationship-based approach that is connected to at least one of the standards? So when we talk about standards, there are a number of states that have family engagement standards in place. And so when we say, is it tied to the standards, that's what we mean. There are also competencies of family engagement through NAFSCI that are available that you can use as a frame to help you develop your family engagement programs. Does it support a family as their child's guide in the educational process? We know in every family there's a person who mostly acts as a child's learning guide, and it may not necessarily be a parent. It could be a grandparent or an aunt or somebody else who's a significant contributor. And that's an important question to ask. Who is the main point of contact? Who is the one that is going to be doing the primary support of education, including homework and things like that? And then how do you evaluate and share the effectiveness of the work that you're doing? Make sure you're getting feedback after every event that you have from your parents about, what worked well, what didn't work well, what are they going to be able to take from the event and use right away at home? What further questions do they have? What is lingering in their mind? What more do they need? We're going to talk about implicit bias, and you're probably wondering, what does this have to do with family engagement? Um, Examining and looking at our biases ongoing is really part of the work that we do ongoing as we progress through life. And our biases are influenced by our beliefs, values, assumptions, and experiences. And those experiences are also related to education, religion, gender, personality, class, age, and ethnicity. We all have biases because we all have these unique experiences, beliefs, values, and assumptions based on our own lived experience. It's our unique perspective. But to be culturally sensitive, we need to understand and acknowledge that there are cultural differences as well as similarities. And without assigning values to those, we need to determine what they are and how we can leverage them for the betterment of our programs and our students' success. I present this wheel of power and privilege as another way of looking at how we examine our biases. When you look at this wheel, the closer you are in a category towards power, the more power you have in that situation. So as you look at this wheel, think about your role as an educator. Where do you sit in that area of power and privilege? But where do you sit as a community member? Where do you sit as a parent, perhaps yourself, or as a family member? Those areas change depending on the context and time. So when you look at that, think about your parents and how they experience school from their experiences, right? And if they are in a more marginalized area, we need to be cognizant of that so we can support them and help them understand the system and where we're going, and help them not feel powerless. We want to empower them. So there's two types of bias. There's explicit bias and implicit bias. And explicit bias happens to just through your thoughts. It's communicated directly. It's very conscious. It's planned. It's organized. Um, An example is I don't hire blank, and you can fill in the blank. That would be an explicit bias. But an implicit bias is what happens without thinking. It could be communicated indirectly, it's subconscious, and it's usually spontaneous. An example would be sitting, getting on the subway and sitting next to someone closer to your race. So we have to be really cognizant of both of those in the work that we do around families. Asking our questions, are our biases getting in the way of developing a trusting relationship with this family? The ladder of inference, we want to make sure as we're making inferences about people that those inferences aren't leading to hurtful conclusions, right? So in this instance, it's the child and his family self-identify as Mexican and speak Spanish as their first language, right? So that's directly observable data. So what does that look like in the ladder of inference? They're immigrants. They could be here illegally and don't understand how things work in America. I'm going to have to spend a lot of time educating this family. They will probably not listen to what I say and continue to do things as their culture dictates. So why bother? I don't know about you, but as a former school principal, I've heard this, and that's those kinds of inferences are what lead to disengagement with families. And we encourage you to also watch for those inferences as you're planning your family engagement events. We want to interrupt biased perceptions of families. This is, as I was saying earlier, we want to really make sure we're addressing this and it's really cognizant in the work that we do. And we're very explicit about interrogating our activities for that bias and that inference that may be unhealthy. We have a resource guide at MEEC called Building Leaders, and the Building Leaders Guide has 4 components to it. It is a educator's guide to family leadership, because that's what we want to do. We want families to be leaders, right? Leaders in their home, leaders in their school, and to really promote their student success, but also support the work that's happening in our buildings. So there's 4 components to our Building Leaders Guide: relationships, knowledge and skills, advocacy, and confidence and efficacy. Thank you, Jasmine, for sharing the link. You can go to the link and you can request a free guide from our website. So when we talk about relationships, parents must be seen, heard, and valued. How do we do that? Well, we provide a platform where families can share their experiences and stories, establish those trusting and authentic relationships, focus on what families do well. See, there's that asset-based approach, creating culturally and linguistically responsive family engagement and partnership. Use common terms and stay clear of education jargon. We've been trying to do that since I started in education, and it's really hard because as educators, we fall right back into our educational jargon without even knowing it. So we have to kind of check ourselves to make sure that parents are understanding what we are saying. We want to be intentional about including parents in decision-making processes by hosting focus groups, in-person events, and inviting families to participate on committees or conducting surveys to influence change. Many states and school districts require that parents are part of school improvement planning processes. So if they're required to be part of it, let's make it really intentional and engaging for them and meaningful, rather than checking a box to say, yep, we invited parents to a couple meetings, we showed them the documents and off they went. That's not really engaging families and getting their input. We want to provide 2-way ongoing communication via email, phone calls, in-person meetings, and other communication applications. Earlier, I talked about a beginning of the year survey that teachers could provide to their families to ask them about their hopes and dreams for their child. On that survey, you could include, what is the best way to communicate with you? Who is the best person to communicate with? And what are the best times to communicate with you? That way you are respecting boundaries, right? But you're also understanding when they are available and can spend time and focus and speak with you. Um, of course, after hours, communication and phone calls may be difficult, so you may have to um, limit the time frame to either during the school day, or if during your preparation time or planning time, so that parents understand that you have boundaries as well. Knowledge and skill. This is important. The as much as we change our curriculum and change our standards and do these things, it's hard sometimes for us to keep up. So imagine being a parent and now your child is coming home with a whole new program or curriculum, and you don't know what it is. And so, how do we build their knowledge and skills so that they understand what is happening in the schools and they can support it at home, right? And so, we want to make sure that we are engaging parents in that meaningful way. An example I'll use is we've worked in districts where we've helped them form parent advisory groups or key communicator groups comprised of all parents. And what those groups do is give input and feedback on programs and even school policy that intend to be implemented in the schools. How do you receive those? What questions do you have about this? For example, we worked with a school district who was doing some school to career work. They brought parents in, explained to them the whole program and process and how they were going to be phasing it into the school district, starting in elementary school and moving it up into the grades, and then talked about what the different elements were. The parents were really interested in that. But one thing that they said to us is, well, how can we support this at home? And we said, well, what do you need? What would be the best way for parents in our community to support this program at home? They gave the district some feedback. And at the next meeting, the district came back with a product that was an example of the feedback they had given for the parents to say, that's what we were talking about. That's exactly what we need. And within 2 months of that initial conversation, the district was flooded with information around this program for parents that was usable and actionable and understandable to use right at home. Advocacy. So here's some tips for educators, right? We want parents to be advocates for their students. But I know sometimes when I hear the word advocate, I get a little nervous. I'm like, oh, is this a lawyer? No, it's not a lawyer. It's really a person who is there to speak up for their child, or perhaps that family's child that the family doesn't feel as though they can speak for themselves. So we really do want to encourage families to speak up for their child and their concerns. We want to support them in and know that one person can be a change maker in that child's life. We want to motivate persons to complete tasks and reach their goals. So there's that whole goal setting piece, when you're having parent teacher conversations. Here's how, your child did during this first semester or first rating period. And let's set some mutual goals for your child so that, we're all on the same page and we know where we're going. And then making sure parents understand that it's really important that if the child comes home with some sort of communication, that they communicate back and acknowledge it. We want parents to sit at the table as equal partners when decisions are made. This is their child, and they know their child better than we do. Even though I know sometimes as educators we think we do, but it's actually the parent who knows much more about that child than we do. One of the things a parent may not understand about the child that we may understand better is how that child interacts with new information all throughout the school day, and what kind of persistence are they showing, what kind of frustration are they showing, and to talk to parents about how that could be mitigated at home. What strategies do they use when new learning is presented to their child and they receive frustration? This is that joint conversation. We might experience it more than a parent does in that sense, but that's a really good conversation to have with parents. We want to create a safe space for underserved parents to share their stories. And we want to help families and community members learn to find their own solutions. One of the great ways to do this is through community asset mapping, to have to do that either within your own school or with your district, and then have those resources available within the school so parents can pick up a flyer or brochure and say, oh, I didn't know this service was available in my community. That's one of the beauties of community schools, is that all of those pieces are built into it. And then being confident means that the parents really have the ability to share and say what's on their mind. They, we want them to know where to go for information or know who to ask. We want to offer assistance, but in a supportive way. We have some sentence stems and examples there. I remember it was super busy when both my child were very young. Can I help you prepare for meeting your child's needs and schedules? That's a way to offer assistance, to say, I've been there. I'm a mom, I'm a dad, and I know what it's like to try to get everybody ready and get to school on time. What can I do to help you? And that kind of supportive conversation could be really helpful if a child is having trouble getting to school on time, or maybe missing school because there's things going on in the family's life. So having those kind of supportive conversations is really good. That can help influence and build parent confidence and efficacy. We want to trust our own judgment, right? When we feel confident and we feel effective, we want to know that our judgment is good. And in that sense, we want to be able to say, oh, I can see both sides of this issue, but I'm confident in my personal experiences and needs. That's what that means, right? And then feeling empowered to provide input on decision making and promote effective cooperation to help make team decisions. So, that one is really the big end result of all of the things that we talked about, right? Helping families feel empowered to provide input on decision making and promote effective cooperation to help make team decisions. If we don't have a strong foundation in trust, if we don't recognize parents as their child's first teacher and they all want their child to thrive and succeed, it's very hard to help parents feel as though they're empowered to provide input on decision making and to promote effective cooperation to help them make team decisions. It's really hard. So what I suggest to all of you on this call is that as you take a look at the information that we have provided today, that you think about the frameworks we've provided and how can that help promote your family engagement opportunities. As an equity assistance center and as a family engagement center, we are here to provide technical assistance to folks who are interested in engaging this work. So our contact information is here. And we have a bit of time for questions. So I'd love to engage with all of you and speak with all of you around this topic. And while we're doing that, I invite you to scan the QR code on this slide. The QR code will lead you to a short survey that we do at Cafe. That survey will help us understand if we've met your needs, what we can do better, and what you may have more questions about. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Great. Thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
I'm going to just add to that. I mean, there were so many great takeaways from the research that you shared, the frameworks, the strategies, and that we can apply, and work together with families for our students' success and achievement, and well-being, including their digital well-being. And so, as a reminder, the FACE program and resources have been designed to align with standards outlined by leaders in the field, such as NAFSCI, National PTA, and the dual capacity building framework that Rita mentioned earlier. Our implementation recommendations are in our FACE program guide, which can be found on our member hub. And this gives you examples of how you can take Common Sense's resources on media and tech and use them to reflect, connect, collaborate, and lead alongside families. And so we, I also wanted to share and make sure that you all are aware of our in-depth ed tech reviews. Our expert review gives you the details about the pros and cons um, and suggestions on how to use a tool, the learning ratings for engagement, pedagogy, and support. And there's also community ratings from fellow educators, so you can discover what others think about that as well. We have a list of the best communication platforms for teachers in schools, many of which you all are probably familiar with. And so I will take just a second to walk you through one of those. Um, this example is Spaces EDU. And it's a great example of a platform that can be used to bring together student assessment, student assignment, sorry, assignments, assessment, and reporting, and parent communication. And so if you're on the Common Sense website, this is what that review looks like and provides all of that information in the review for you to know if it's a useful tool. And I'm pretty sure this group knows this, but I always want to remind folks that Common Sense is a nonprofit with a strong commitment to an unbiased, in-depth editorial process. So our ratings and reviews of learning media aren't influenced by developers or funders, and we never receive payment or other compensation for these reviews. So these are us really, truly looking and seeking out the best tools for educators. And so just coming back, if there are any questions, I was looking at the chat, Rita, and I see a couple of comments, folks agreeing that, we want families to feel part of their child's education for success. And, that, it is a struggle to get parent engagement at schools. And so trying to take some of these strategies and apply them. I did have one question I saw, I think, let me go back. And there's that survey again that Rita shared. If you take a moment to help us fill that out and let us know if this has been helpful. There was one question, maybe Rita, you might want to try this. Are there any strategies for effectively marketing to families and inspiring their desire to engage around critical topics like digital health and wellness? They've faced some challenges in gaining family buy-in, and would just love some ideas on how to communicate those that immediate need and personal connection to important matters.
Yeah, that's a really great question because I think we all struggle with getting more parents or getting additional parents to our family engagement events. I think we've all experienced having kind of that same group of parents coming to every event and you don't see new faces. So how in the world do we get those folks and parents in? Because we want to engage with them too. Um, one thing that I found that was really effective was to offer the events in multiple modalities. So offer it in person, but also have a Zoom opportunity, a video call opportunity for parents who may not be able to actually physically make it into the school. Timing is a huge issue for some parents, and some parents just can't make it. It's not that they don't want to be there, they just can't make it by juggling all the other responsibilities they've had. That was one thing I really learned, and it hit me hard during the pandemic when I was still in K-12 education in a school district. And the number of parents that would come onto Zoom trainings around social emotional learning and the various topics we were presenting was unbelievable. When we returned to in-person learning, we were still holding them as Zoom events, and parents were coming in flocks to these events and really appreciated that opportunity to have that. Um, another piece is to couple what you're doing with digital health and wellness with another event. You have a huge turnout when at sporting events. You have huge turnout at musical events and at plays because they want to see their kids perform.
Mhm.
So here's another way to have them engage, right? With this kind of learning through maybe flyers or QR code to a podcast they can listen to around it. There are all those different ways. Think about all the different ways we get our information and use that to engage and inform how you provide information to your parents. So ask them, are you avid podcast listeners? Would you rather have this information as a podcast or as a video or both? And because those things are easily linked to websites, and more I know that not everybody has access to the technology, but we're also going to offer it in print through flyers, through brochures, through other resources that you may have. So use that as opportunities. So you have, like I said, low impact and high impact, right? Low impact things are having flyers and things at an event. High impact thing would be to have um, either a Zoom or an in-person, formal training where they walk out of there with a product or an idea or some way in which they can engage with their child around this topic and build their efficacy in talking to their child around that topic, right? So we're building knowledge and skills, we're building confidence and efficacy, we're continuing to work on our relationships. It's all part of the entire process.
Yeah, I was thinking a lot of the similar suggestions that you just mentioned. Having that, even if you don't have a ton of parents, if you have one or two parents who you can start to ask, like, what are the things that get you to tune into something, to read, to you know be open and receptive to the information that we're sharing, and so kind of getting some support from taking off your teacher hat and listening to the parent hat of like how they're expecting or wanting to receive information is definitely important. And with the common sense face resources, we try to offer them in a variety of formats. And so we have the topics, and in each of those topics around digital wellness, there are articles, there are videos, there are quick tips, there are things that you can easily copy and paste and pop into an email or a school newsletter. And so thinking about what are the most effective formats for sharing that information with families, is really key to knowing your own community, and then taking what we have and take some of our language. If you're having if you're having a hard time thinking about like how to communicate or write about some of these things, just literally you can take some of the language that we have, some of the marketing copy that we try to put together that speaks to parents, directly to parents, around why it's so critical for kids to have a full night's sleep and put their devices away at the end of the night, or to balance their screen time with other offline activities. And so we welcome you, using us and being able to have some of that language, and then also partnering with other um, subject areas and educators, I think is a great idea. I was thinking about that, like if you're doing a wellness event and it's around nutrition or around some physical sporting activity or things like that, bring in mental health and mental wellness and digital well-being into that as well. And so just the things that parents are already showing up, families are already showing up for, insert yourself in there. um and let's see, I think we have time for maybe like one more question. Um, there was a question around what are some good starting points in building relational trust within a school?
I think the first step I would take, the first step I recommend, is to really taking a look internally at ourselves, right? Doing a needs assessment, doing a self-reflection on what are we currently doing? And that includes looking at our own biases, right? And examining those. Are we holding biases about a certain group of families, maybe that is creating an unwelcome environment? What does our school environment look like? Is it a welcoming school? If I'm going to go into a school and it's not welcoming, if the hallways are dirty, if the or there's nothing on the walls that show reflect me and my culture, if the office isn't welcoming, that's really hard. That's a really hard time then to try to build trust outside of that office space. So identifying and doing a needs assessment, as well as really taking some time to look at our biases, examine those, interrogate those, and develop a plan to mitigate them, is hugely helpful in that vein. Having said that, with needs assessments as an organization, we do have a needs assessment that we can use with schools to help them on their way to self-assess their family engagement programs and plans.
Great. Well, I don't think I see any other questions, but thank you for those questions. And um, I think that will wrap it up for us today. As a reminder, please refer to the FACE member hub for links to everything that you need. I will drop that link in the chat as well. From the toolkit to our events, that's all can be found on the FACE member hub. And speaking of events, we have a few upcoming dates to be on the lookout for. In February, we will have our office hours on February 5th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. So drop in, come with any questions. We're there to answer questions during that hour. Our next cohort meeting will be on February 19th. And then our next parent webinar will be at the end of February. You'll notice that date has shifted from our original date on February 5th because we're excited to launch a new research report, our 0 to 8 census study, which looks at how young children are using media and technology. And so we'll be bringing those new findings and insights to that conversation. So stay tuned for all of that. And then finally, our next professional development workshop will be held on March 27th. And the topic is AI literacy. We're presenting that training in collaboration with NAFSC's Center for Family Math. Registration for that will open shortly. And we'll share the links in all the usual places, the monthly FACE email, Slack, and on the member hub. So please stay tuned. Follow our new education Instagram channel and subscribe to our weekly education newsletter if you haven't already. And again, please stay in touch with Rita, Cafe, and MAEC. This is all of their information. And thank you again, Rita, and thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Yeah, thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Bye bye, everyone.
Bye.